Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Davis and I'm going to be your instructor for the next 10 weeks for your Introduction to HIPAA class. This week we are going to be covering Chapter 1 in your textbook, and I've included the slides that go along with Chapter 1. Once you complete the reading, you're going to have about 10 or so questions to answer for an assignment, as well as the discussion post for this week and a quiz for this week. So let's take a quick peek at what is covered in Chapter 1. These are just some of the objectives of Chapter 1. The whole point of this entire course is to understand what HIPAA is all about. So this first piece is going to be, why? Why did HIPAA? Where did it come from? Why do we have it? Things like that. We're going to look at the law surrounding healthcare and the insurance industry. We're going to look at why we need to protect privacy and the security of our health information. We're going to know who's covered by HIPAA, and we're going to look at the importance of the HIPAA officer and the different areas affected by HIPAA. So basically, the reason that Congress passed the HIPAA law was to combat fraud, abuse, waste, those types of things. The whole idea is that we are, hoping to make things a little smoother, a little bit easier. Those are some of the things that Congress was hoping for from HIPAA. Now, when we think of HIPAA, we think more about privacy, but there is a lot more to HIPAA than just the privacy piece. So it is going to talk about the standards for privacy, but in addition to privacy, we're going to be looking at things like transactions. In other words, how do those transactions occur between the insurance company and the provider and things like that? How do we keep information secure? Not just our private information, but our transactional information, things like that. What are some of the identifiers that we're going to be using? And they want to standardize that so that we're all talking the same language, basically. We don't want, one group to be using one set of identifiers and another group to be using something totally different, because then those two systems can't talk to each other. So those were the four main topics that were part of HIPAA when it went into effect. And like I said, most of us are probably the most familiar with the privacy piece of that, but there is a lot more to it. So Title 1 and Title 4 were all about health plans. Things like what happens when you change jobs. How do you keep that health coverage? Not necessarily the same health coverage, but how do we make sure that there's a smooth transition? How do we prohibit discrimination? So in other words, how do we keep some people from not being allowed to have health insurance? A lot of times this is in relation to pre-existing conditions and things like that. Guaranteed renewability for group plans and access to coverage under the group. So when you get a new job and you join a new company, you typically don't have to jump through many hoops to get into their group plan. Because you're part of their group, you're automatically granted access to that particular group. Title 2 focuses on the providers, and when we talk about providers, we mean those that are providing service. So this might be doctors, but this could also be laboratories, it could be pharmacies, it could be hospitals, anything along those lines. So some of the focus on providers had to do with preventing fraud and abuse. So in other words, they were not able to, maybe make unrealistic claims. So there was things established for that. Certain standards were established as far as electronic transmission so that everyone's doing it the same way. A lot of simplification in this piece of HIPAA. In other words, we're trying to make it as simple as possible for everyone to be able to submit those claims. Now, the different folks that are covered under HIPAA include insurance plans, any type of healthcare providers, and any type of healthcare clearinghouses. And when we talk about clearinghouses, what that means is a third party who's administering things like provide insurance plans, or maybe you have a third party who's handling the billing for a provider, things like that. Um, and here they talk a little bit about some of those third party payers. Third party payers are like, who is that insurance company? So it could be any type of federal program, Medicare, Medicaid, prescription drug card sponsors. So not necessarily your insurance card for prescriptions, but there are other types of prescription drug cards. Specific private plans, any HMOs, and any type of supplemental insurance. So a healthcare provider is defined as someone who is going to furnish some of these things. Not necessarily everything, but they might do some of these things. So they might provide preventative care, diagnostic care, rehabilitative care, palliative care, counseling, assessment services, or you can also be a healthcare provider if you either sell or dispense healthcare drugs, devices, equipment, anything related to a prescription. Those are all considered healthcare providers. And then a healthcare clearinghouse is anyone who receives information from a provider. They adjust information into standard transactions, and they send claims for adjudication. So this is the middleman. So when we think of a clearinghouse, we're thinking of the middleman, the person who gets it from one place to another. So between the third-party payers and the providers is where these clearinghouses usually sit. And then finally, this chapter talks about the HIPAA officer. The HIPAA officer, anytime you have someone within one of these entities, a provider, a clearinghouse, etc., there is one person typically who is assigned the duties of the HIPAA officer. So it's their job to oversee that all of these things are being met. So if for some reason these, something changes with the law, whatever, they're responsible for knowing and implementing those changes. So after you go through this chapter, if you have any problems or questions, please make sure that you reach out to me, and have a great week.